Hi. Hopefully this works, and I'm hoping that it's somewhat informative. I'm not an expert on World War II. I'm a historic reenactor and dilettante in my research, and I like to share, and that's why I'm here today. For the last several years, at about this time of year, I usually am putting on a demonstration at a high school that a friend of mine teaches at. She requested, after helping me to move, to bring some of my collection for her advanced placement history students to see, and I more than happily agreed. I love sharing my hobby. This is going to be a little stilted, I think, because I prefer live exhibition / demonstration, because I can observe the items people are interested in and then address those specifically, as opposed to a reveal video, which this is going to be pretty much the start of. This is the introduction video to my channel, and I'm hoping that it will actually be useful and helpful, and that my friend can get her students to watch this in some way. It's a poor substitute, but at least it's a substitute for the live demonstration. I miss them all and wish I could bring them my collection. I portray a soldier in the 193rd Rifle Division of the RKKA, the Workers and Peasants Red Army of the Soviet Union during World War II. Not only do I collect original and reproduction Red Army uniforms and equipment, but my collection expanded and includes most of the major powers that participated in World War II, a significant event of the 20th century that still affects us to this day. You can do a lot of research, you can read a lot of books, and heck, just a quick Kindle search on Amazon shows over 17,000 titles of books written about World War II. The vast majority of them about the strategy and tactics and the politics and the what-fors and what-ofs of people trying to guess what happened then. Very few of the books are about the common people, the common soldiers of the various armies that participated in the war. That's what interests me. I started out big, reading the battle books and everything, and then when I got involved in the historic reenactment, you start with a couple of things, the uniform and the weapon, and for a lot of people that's the end of it, because they're interested in cowboys and Indians, and that's okay. Every good hobby has a variety of tiers of interest involved, and you have to invite all of that in, or you die on the grapevine. It's if you only allow a certain level to participate, you will end up not getting anyone in. So it's okay. I, like a lot, started with the small bits, those little bits of the uniform and the gear, but only the couple of pieces of gear necessary. And then I got interested more and more in the pocket trash, the items the soldiers carried, the items that were issued that may have been dumped very early on because it was weight and the soldier wanted to get it gone. And as a result of that, I also got interested in the different factions and what they issued as well as carried, the differences and the similarities. As a result, I started setting up, and to keep myself from going too overboard, because I am a lover of the deep end of the pool, I started with a very simple, the opposing force to the Red Army, so German. Then I, of course, got interested in American, because my family have served in the American military for almost literally the entire extent of this country's existence. I decided to narrow it down, though, because the American uniforms can be very much expensive. The American gear can be very much expensive because, damn, we equipped our guys with a lot of stuff. America likes to give their troops a lot, even in the past, to help them succeed in the mission. So I restricted myself to the U.S. Marine Corps, because the Marines, when they were doing their beach landings, carried bare minimal gear in. The rest of their equipment would be transported on the beaches, but because of the heat and the humidity, they had a much more stripped down uniform and a much more limited carrying capacity, and were down to the essentials with the next day or the day after the ships unloading their duffel bags of equipment and uniforms and extra spare gear. And of course, by doing U.S. Marines, that then meant, well, I need an opposing force, Imperial Japanese Army. And then I started collecting that. And then I decided Western Front Europe, so I started collecting British equipment. And it has become a spiral that's not downward, that it expands up. It's almost like a tornado of collecting more and more and more. And trying to get original equipment as well as reproduction. The big rule that I had for a lot of the stuff is that I had to be able to carry it or wear it myself, because how else do you understand the experience of the troops? Even though I'm a woman, even though girls can't play on most of the armies because they weren't there and that would ruin the historic experience, that was my rule, because I wanted to understand more about the common soldier. Now, in the Red Army, it's okay to be a girl. Women fought. Not only did they fight in non-combative roles, they fought in combative roles in the Red Army. With the devastation of Operation Barbarossa, and let's face it, it doesn't take much to realize how barbaric the German army behaved and how much they just annihilated everything as they went across countries, not just Russia, but every country. They treated it not just as a conquered foe, but as a disposable foe. With the people not being necessary, we just want the land and the produce and the product. And if you can't produce labor that is useful to us, we don't want you. As a result of that, the Red Army, Russian Army, was forced to do things that, honestly, they didn't want to do. Despite the promise of communism and equality for all, they were very, very much a chauvinistic society. Women had a lot more freedom in certain roles as well as non-certain roles if they had the intelligence and wherewithal to push forward on that. They could be accepted on that. As a result of the desperation of the early years of the Red Army being involved and its absolute destruction, make no doubt about it, the Red Army was probably destroyed at least twice during the war. And they desperately grabbed any able body and threw it in to try to stop the Germans. And if it weren't for the fact that Germany's logistics as well as their behavior were against them, there's a very good chance that they could have completely destroyed Russia and then turned their sights back around to Britain, finish Britain off, and then move on to North America. We do know that from historic research and looking at letters and papers that there was a bit of a plan for that. How good that plan is and how good that idea was is up for us to debate today. As I said, this is an introductory video for my channel and for my demonstration, so there will be other videos showing off the kit from each one of the countries that I've discussed. I'm hoping that this will help and be a substitute, albeit a poor substitute, for the lecture that I usually put on. There's nothing that substitutes really for actually handling a wool uniform, handling even something as common as a tent peg, what they used then, as opposed to what we use for camping now. You can see the origins of a lot of civilian sporting equipment in the military equipment that was developed by all sides to help their soldiers do the one thing that I tell the students that they need to remember out of all the equipment they see, all the issued gear, all the stuff that was given by governments to its troops. Its entire purpose was to aid them in killing their opponents, destroying them, and winning. And that is a very important thing to remember. Now, the uniform I'm wearing right now is that of a lieutenant in the Red Army. It is badged up in the way that this uniform was worn by a young lady named Ludmila Pavlichenko. She was a sniper in the Red Army during the war. She fought at Sevastopol and several other battles. She was wounded a minimum of 4 times, and she served as a sniper in the Red Army. She's just an amazing person. She had 309 confirmed kills of, she preferred to call them Hitlerites or Nazis. She didn't like to think of them as human beings because as far as the Red Army and Russian people were concerned, they weren't humans. How they acted, there was nothing human about them. She was the first Soviet citizen ever received at the White House. After her last wounding, she was withdrawn from combat lines and sent on publicity tours around England and the United States in an effort to get assistance and the Second Front. Now, at the time that she visited the United States, we were not involved in the war. Everybody knew we were going to get there eventually. There was no doubt about that. England was holding on by its fingernails for that. Russia was praying for that. What they wanted was a second front. We provided Lend-Lease supplies. Originally started out as cash and carry and then maneuvered over to leases for properties or promises to return later as we supplied food and materiel to both England and Russia. As she traveled around the United States, she had an interesting experience because the vast majority of reporters were usually from the social columns of the papers and were very intrigued and wanted to know, did she like her uniform because it made her look fat? It was rather old-fashioned. The skirt was down to the mid-calf point, whereas, Western fashions were much higher up, just barely below the knee at that time. No stockings. She was wearing the combat boots at the time, a very high-shank boot, and this uniform. And, what about makeup? This was amazing to her. Russia was fighting for its life. She'd seen friends destroyed in horrific ways on the front. She herself had killed many people. As I said, 309 confirmed kills. And this was the questions being asked. Why wasn't her uniform more fashionable? Why wasn't she wearing makeup? That's amazing. That's amazing, the attitude that we had at the time period. She was a shy 26-year-old who'd never been thrust in this kind of light. She finally found her voice, and at one point during a New York press conference / social event, she asked when were Americans going to stop hiding behind her skirts and come out and help the freedom-loving peoples of the world in defeating the Nazi menace. She made a speech in Chicago that discussed the fact that just because she was a woman didn't mean that she couldn't fight and that women couldn't fight. It also didn't mean because she was fighting she stopped being a loving and caring person. As she stated in her speech, we're loving and caring women just like all women around the world. We had to learn to hate. And that learning to hate was hard. But you had to do that to do what needed to be done. And that is a powerful statement. And that is one of the things that I take away from my historic reenactment and collecting is the individual stories. And as I reveal my equipment, some of it is, as I said, original. Some of it I received from the descendants of the original users of it or from that person themselves. The reproduction equipment, I prefer reproduction uniforms since I do historic reenactment. I don't want to carry original stuff out on what we call our tacticals, where you have to play You uniform up. Non-uniform, non-participants aren't allowed at those events. You uniform up, and we like I said, Cowboys and Indians, we do it. The educational, I like to have the original stuff out there also. And yes, you have to be very concerned because it's 75 years old, and some of it is delicate. But for people and me to participate in discussing this original stuff, handling it, it is more real than a reproduction, because it's amazing. I make reproductions myself of some of the stuff, and I don't necessarily make great reproductions, like when I'm doing my food kits for at the tactical events. What I'm after is the look, the impression. Originals in that situation could be destroyed. You know, and let's face it, I'm not going to eat 75-year-old food. This is not Steve 1989 here. I love his channel, and I love the information he shares. And that's what I'm hoping people will get from this. And I'm hoping that in some way I can relieve some of the boredom, some of the tension, and maybe share an interest in and light a fire about history. And it doesn't have to be World War II. It doesn't have to be military, just history. So I'm hoping, like I said, that this will be at least a poor substitute, but a substitute that will help you in joining me on this journey that this year I can't do, but I want to. So we'll be doing a lot of displays, and I will share some of the books that I have read and some of them that have helped me in my collecting and in my understanding. A lot of them are just tiny little bits that force you to go down that rabbit hole where you find out more. And that's the joy and thrills of history. If you're willing to actually look at it open-minded and not with a narrow viewpoint, you can find out so much. And it's very enlightening. And that enlightenment, I hope, is something that will aid in understanding the past so that we can look to the future and avoid repeating mistakes on the level that happened in World War II. I have no illusions. Human beings have a level of hubris that is unbelievable. We will repeat the mistakes our forebears made. I'm hoping that we never get to that level again like World War II. Thank you.